So, welcome to this rather unusual episode. We're going to try something different. We're actually using video feeds this time, and it's a team effort. We're talking about an exciting product that has been produced for Logos. We're going to be talking about the new edition of Karl Barth's Kirchliche Dogmatik, integrated into the Logos platform. And representing the Logos platform, we have Dr. Matthias Mangold. A real joy to have him involved. He was deeply involved in the generation and publication of this new edition. And we have Marty Folsom as well, who's been a guest on OnScript with me before. But I wanted to introduce you both properly. Matthias is a German. I'm married to a German as well, so I feel as though I'm like kind of honorary German, a little bit. Am I allowed to be an honorary German?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's the right answer. You studied theology, however, not in Germany, but in Switzerland, in Basel, and in Leuven, Belgium. And you completed your PhD in the field of early modern theology just a couple of years ago. And if I understand it correctly, the title of your doctorate was Towards a Reformed Enlightenment. You're hoping to get that published anytime soon?
I'm working on the manuscript right now. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
A very impressive publication list anyway, I saw online. But in his capacity at Logos, as I said, he's been involved in the publication of this new edition of Barth's Kirchliche Dogmatik, which of course is the German, as everybody knows, for church dogmatics. Marty Folsom is Professor of Theology and Biblical Studies and has been for 30 years in New Zealand and Seattle. And he's also been a therapist for 24 years, as well as author of the Face-to-Face trilogy, which is, I think, probably how I got to know you, Marty, on relational theology, which emphasizes personal relationship. In fact, I've just seen a new essay of yours in the Lexham edition on T.F. Lawrence and evangelical theology, reappropriating personal relationship with Jesus language, which I'm absolutely excited about. I just received that this morning. Now, apart from your numerous articles, of course, you're now famous for Karl Barth's Church Dogmatics for Everyone, and two of them are in print, with more to follow. And I've said it before, Marty, I know it's embarrassing, but you are the kind of theologian and person I aspire to be. Now, I would love to ask you, maybe, Matthias, we could begin with you. What brought you to Karl Barth and to working with the Kirchliche Dogmatik or Church Dogmatics?
Well, first of all, I'm as an employee at Logos, we started this project, and I got involved because I'm now also involved in the German team, of course, and the German team at Logos was launching this new project, and so that's how I got involved naturally as part of my job. But I have a history with Barth that goes further back. During my seminary days, I had course on Barth, first volume of the Church Dogmatics, and I also wrote a paper on not the Church Dogmatics, also a bit, but mostly on the exchange between Barth and Brunner on natural theology. And interestingly enough, later on in my PhD work, although it's not about Barth at all, I again worked with natural theology because, as you mentioned, it's towards Reformed Enlightenment. It's about Enlightenment, early Enlightenment theology, and in that context, natural theology played an important role, and obviously that played a big role in the discussion between Barth and Brunner in the 30s. So yeah, that's my relationship with Barth, as it were.
That's brilliant, thank you. And of course, this is for people may be familiar with Barth's short, sharp response to Brunner in this debate, and it was simply Nein, but we won't get to that today, as fascinating and as hilarious as that is. Marty, what brought you to Barth? Maybe you could just tell us as well what brought you to the point of writing Church Dogmatics for Everyone.
Very good. So Many decades ago, I began a journey asking the question, what does it mean to have theology that actually informs the nature of human relationships with one another and with God? Most of what was being written in the 90s, people were dismissing any language of the relational. I took a course from James Torrance at Fuller Seminary in Seattle, and he began to open up an understanding of the Torrances, obviously himself, but also the Torrances indebted to Karl Barth. And so I began to read there and asked him, where would you suggest that I go to do a PhD to further my study of understanding a relational understanding of persons? And he said, well, of course, you must go to New Zealand and study with my son, Alan. So that, in fact, I did do. So Alan, in helping me figure out what I needed to do my PhD on, said, why don't you do a comparative study on the nature of what it means to be persons, and specifically free persons, using Karl Barth, John McMurray, the Scottish philosopher, and John Zizioulas, the Greek Orthodox theologian. Each one of them are, in a sense, relational, but had a very distinct understanding of what it meant to be free persons. But for all of them, it was the fulfillment of it. So that was where I really dug into Karl Barth and went through the entire Dogmatics over the course of a few years and tried to understand what it was that Barth provided as a way forward for something I considered quite practical. So I wasn't just going to study Barth for Barth, but to follow what James and Alan both said, and that is that Karl Barth really came to serve the church, to give insight into something that wasn't merely academic theology, but really did inform the nature of what it meant to be human beings alive in the context of the life that God brings to us. So with that kind of agenda and doing my doctoral work and really wanting that to be something that would be readable by people, I began my thinking of, how to be academic, but also make it available for everyday kind of language. So the years that I've taught theology, I use Karl Barth, but I'm always working at trying to have people not be overwhelmed by the great wheelbarrow of white, whatever Karl called them, that the angels laugh at him as he goes by, but that there was a sense of invitation. So my proposal to write the Church Dogmatics, Karl Barth's Church Dogmatics for everyone, was to do what's often people say, I just wish I had a 40,000 foot view of this so I could get oriented as what's going on. So I literally just begin with that metaphor and begin working in just believing that we need to start with Karl Barth very simply, but not leave people there. Mike Habits in New Zealand also said while I was there once, what Karl Barth needed was a good editor so he could get the really important stuff accessible and all that. So that has been in the back of my mind too, that people really want the content of Karl Barth's work, but there's a lot of just the bulk of the size of it, and also the history of those who are interlocutors that become problematic for people. So to really write something that people could read it and say, is that the point? Okay, that's good. Now I can go read the Dogmatics and see what all of those other historical dimensions provide in filling it out. And of course, I can't get everything into, a very short kind of piece like that. But in the end, to also write insights for pastors, insights for theologians, they're the things that I learned from Alan and others along the way that said, it's worth the dive. It's worth really getting the points that are to be made there. And I want to make sure that you get at least that. If you engage and you say, I understand it now, but it's not important, that's an entirely different thing than just not being able to engage the content of what is there. So that has been my goal, is to make available, starting with the most simple, the whole Dogmatics in one word is Jesus. Are you ready for the next step? And really to proceed from there. And I've had very good success with people starting at that level. They say, this is finally a book that I feel like I can start at that most simple place and move on from it.
This is brilliant, Marty. Thank you. Could you say, just in a nutshell, what is the most exciting and exhilarating aspect of engaging particularly with church dogmatics?
I think to really get the idea of Deus Dixit, that God speaks. I mean, the thing that most people who do kind of relational thinking have as a problem is they talk about God talking, but they don't let God speak. And so when you read the Dogmatics, that Karl Barth is really attempting to be attentive to the God in the person of Jesus who speaks through Scripture, and you can orient what it looks like to then begin to hear the whole unfolding of the Dogmatics as a clarifying conversation where God is speaking to us. We become listeners. It impacts everything. There isn't putting everything in a box. It is literally being invited into the dynamic of a relationship. And that's invigorating. And so to follow the metaphors that I use with that through each of the series, the climbing the mountain, as Will Willman said, I've climbed the mountain with Karl Barth in Volume 1, and the whole sense of the musicality reflecting the sense on Mozart, but making the whole of God's self-revelation is inviting us into the music of God. And the third volume, Hospitality, that this God invites us to spend time and be with. All of this has made the Dogmatics, I think, invitational by character and by the auditory sense that I think is just so often missing from the way people do theology at all, which I often say we speak of God as though he's an old man sitting in the room who we're talking about. The Dogmatics, as I'm reading and understanding it, is really letting God show up as the one who comes, speaks to us, embraces us, and goes the journey from there with us. That is the most exciting part for me.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Marty. I mean, it will be. I've done quite a bit on Barth, on script, and some wonder what a New Testament scholar is doing, reading this theologian, and maybe it's time for me to say as well, my little personal story before we turn to the Logos edition. When I moved to Germany back in 2001. I went through a bit of a faith crisis. I had been raised in a certain form of conservative evangelicalism, which I'm very grateful for, but wasn't well equipped to deal with challenging questions when you're taken outside of your comfort zone. You're surrounded by certain gatekeepers, and once you start to challenge those foundations, you can be left in a very dangerous place of existential threat to your very faith. I remember one Christmas in the Landeskirche in Germany, in the Christmas service, sitting there wondering to myself, oh my goodness, what if any of this just isn't true? And what I was questioning was the integrity of the foundations upon which I had constructed my confident faith. And they needed to be ripped down, however, because they were fragile, shot through with misconceptions, idolatry, sin, as is our human nature. And turning to Karl Barth at that time was life-saving for me. I remember picking up, there's a number of second-hand bookshops in Tübingen, although they've reduced now to just 2, I think. Beautiful old theological second-hand bookshops, and I picked up a copy of volume 4, the first part. I think it was the 60th paragraph, Jesus als Knecht, Jesus Christus als Knecht. This is in the 20s, in the German Studienausgabe of the Kirchliche Dogmatik, and together with other authors, it reorientated me to attend to real foundations, that there is no other foundation upon whom we can build other than Jesus Christ. And at that point, I realized just how important the living Jesus and Christology truly is in the construction of my own theological thinking. And I've come to see how important and vital that remains as a word of warning and encouragement for Western theology that has often allowed so many other voices that foundational result, sometimes with horrific consequences. Karl Barth was producing a theology, it seemed to me, that was constructed precisely to attend to these foundations, to point to Jesus, to allow no other starting point, but in light of that, to then do whatever you like. God can speak through a dead dog. But to make sure that our starting point is the one we worship. If we can't worship our starting points, then we've got it wrong. And this was something I remain eternally grateful to Karl Barth for. And so it's a joy to really turn our attention now to Die Kirchliche Dogmatik in the Logos edition. And maybe Marty first, before we turn back to you, Matthias. What are the sort of things that you do, Marty, in your own study with this new Logos edition? What's it brought to the table, this particular platform, as you research and write?
Yes. So every day, and it's literally every day, I sit down in front of my computer and I have been working with the English text. And so I bring that up in Logos. I have a collection that's Karl Barth. And so when I received my German edition, it shows up now with that as well. So I can go and select, and I've just been finishing volume 3. So I have the English edition up and then I have the German there. And so I'll start just reading through in the English, and inevitably there are things that don't immediately make sense. And so I'll say, well, I wonder what it was in the original. So then I click over to the German edition. The German edition comes up and people say, does it connect phrase by phrase, line by line to the English? No, it does not. But if you just highlight a word, a phrase, a paragraph, immediately it shows up translated on the right-hand side. Now, it is a translation also, but it's a translation that often shows distinctives that aren't there in what were the Bromley Torrance editions in English. And so it allows you to pay attention to words that are distinct. If there is a word that shows up different, then I often will click on that and right-click, and up comes alternate definitions of that. So I have immediate access to alternate words that help to give insight and to figure out sometimes what word would be a better word to use there. And so that then goes into the summary that I'm writing I'm just finishing volume 3. So I'll use that word maybe instead. And I don't footnote all of that, but it's integrating my conversation with the original text for anything that is other than what one would access in the English text. And so those distinctives become important. And sometimes it's even just the title of a subsection, that there's a slightly different, instead of respect for life, it's respect in view of life or something like that. That it just gives a slightly different perspective that allows me to live in the moment of the dynamic of how Barth is arranging the words. That the German just gives me a little bit more clarity in something that I can bring into what it is that I'm doing in the summary form of it. I also can take and copy and put it into translators on the internet. So, there's just one place. Now I'm drawing on the original and I can go with what's there. There is, I think, a German dictionary that is within Logos that I don't have digitally yet, but I have it on my shelf hard copy. So I can go and look up words because now I know what the original was. And so I can do the work of appealing to other sources, either hard copy or on the internet. So it just opens up kind of what Logos was originally designed for with biblical studies. That whole thing is unfolding. I'm sure there will be more German resources as we go along that we'll also be able to be interfaced with. So the whole ability to do what people want to do in biblical studies, of going back to the original languages, that's basically what I'm doing. And to say, they're all translations in English. If I were to do a translation, what is the material that I would work with? And sometimes there's not much different. Sometimes there is, and those are the gold mines. And sometimes for me, it's where Barth really gets into this mode of allowing the clarity of relation of what's going on with the words that are with the relation of Christ and the church. And I think somebody said to me, why are you writing Karl Barth's Church Dogmatic for everyone? The Dogmatics itself is for everyone. And I do think that is true, that the nature of what Karl Barth did originally was for everyone. And going back to the German, there are actually ways that, at least the way I'm reading it as I'm translating the German, I see nuances in the German that make it more accessible in a sense than what was done with the Torrance Bromley editions. And people have said that those need to be translated again anyway. Well, this gives you at least a chance to get back to the German and say, what was it they're working with and what tools can I use to do responsible reading and looking to see that I'm getting as clear of an idea as possible with that one look deeper at least, and maybe beyond that. And so every day I am looking things up in the German edition. There isn't a day that goes by where there isn't a phrase or a sentence that I go and am checking or getting clarity as to what is being said. And sometimes it really makes a difference between not understanding and understanding. I mean, it can be that significant. So I think that's probably it in a nutshell at this point.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that. It raises the interesting question as well with copying and pasting chunks or paragraphs into. I mean, I wonder what AI translation is going to make of some of this as it develops. There's a what's it? A can of worms is an expression. I don't know if you know what that one, Matthias, for Barth work, but yeah, I mean, maybe there'll be a Google AI translation of the Kirchliche Dogmatik on Amazon at some stage. Who knows, eh? Matthias, if you can share your screen, if you want to, it'd be great. If you want to show us the sort of things that we can do in Logos with the Kirchliche Dogmatik and how that can help us in our translation and more besides. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I hope you can see my screen now. This is the Logos home screen, as you will see when you open up. Well, you will see probably the home part. The image is there, but this is the Logos software the two of you are familiar with. Some of the listeners or viewers will not know it, so I'll start slowly and then I'll show step by step how you can work with the Church Dogmatics even in the German original. So some of the things Marty already mentioned, I will also show so that you have also the image to the words. But in Logos, you have obviously this library of works, not only the Church Dogmatics, but many other books, Bible translations, as has already been mentioned. Logos, as the name also suggests, comes from biblical studies, was originally produced and made to help biblical scholars access various resources, but also, of course, the original languages, the Bible in original languages, Greek and Hebrew, and other languages. So that's the background, and now we're on the English side. There have been many more resources. At the German side, we're a little bit lacking behind, but we're also adding resources on systematic theology, and there are also, as has been mentioned already, new German resources on Barth and related theologians are in the pipeline, as they say. So in this installation of my Logos, I added, of course, as you can now see, the German dogmatics, German Church Dogmatics, the Kirchliche Dogmatik. At Logos, we produce our resources based on the printed materials. So what you're looking now at is the Studienausgabe of the Church Dogmatics. Maybe that's important.
I can't see that yet for some reason. It's just a blank
that's
image.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Maybe that's the way in which I share my screen. Maybe I need to share my whole screen and then it pops up. Let's try that one. Yes, now you can see it.
Boom. Boom. There we are.
I only shared the window and then these pop-ups don't show up. But yeah. So where was I? Here. So here you see the covers of the Studienausgabe, which is one of the two editions, the newer edition. On my shelf over here, you see the original edition. But we, at Logos, as I said, we produce all our resources based on the printed materials so that when, as a scholar, you want to reference it, you can actually reference the book while looking at the digital resource. So, yeah. And in addition to the Church Dogmatics, I added several other resources related to Barth you will also find in our shop if you're interested. And there's just, plenty of books explaining the Church Dogmatics, dealing with various aspects of Karl Barth's life and thought. And among them are also 2 volumes by our other guest, by Marty. So this series, Karl Barth's Church Dogmatics for Everyone, is also available in Logos and is fully integrated into our system. So whenever you click on a reference to Karl Barth's Dogmatics, you will be taken to the Church Dogmatics text. So, for instance, here there was a reference to certain pages, and then it opens up the Church Dogmatics at exactly that place. But first thing first, let's just open the Church Dogmatics. Let's start maybe with the German edition. So if you type in the name, then you will see all the volumes that are related. These are, you can then just click on them, whatever you like. Let's just start with the first volume. So we'll add another one. Let's see. Very good. Let's take this one. So this is volume 14 on the creature, das Geschöpf. And if you want to read that along with the English, then you have basically two options. You can open the English alongside and then just create two columns and then link those two windows. But the easier option is to select the multiple book view, and there you have the two sets, the English one and the German. If you select them, then and you go to the actual text, then you will see how they appear side by side if you activate the two book view. That is probably preface. Here you go. And then you can, as Marty said, you can just read those side by side, compare them. You can, of course, jump to any place where you want to read. So here in the search field, Church Dogmatics 3.2, and then you see it jumps to the first to this chapter, and alongside the English, there's the German, or the other way around, and then you can just read side by side. What you can do also is pull up a translation pane on the right hand side, and this actually is AI translation. So this is integrated from Google Translate or DeepL, and whenever you select a section, let's say this first sentence over here, it will take a few seconds, and then you will see an AI translation on the right hand side. Of course, I should select the German. Sorry for that. But if you select the German, then you will get an English translation, or if you prefer a different language, whatever, Armenian, you can also do that. So whatever language is available here, you can choose, and then you can get the translation in that language. English. Let's stick with English for a moment.
Matthias, could you just I'm just looking on my Logos at the moment while we do this, trying to see exactly where that live AI translation is. And maybe it's because we have different versions of Logos.
That's true.
That could be it.
The auto translation feature is available. I cannot say for sure with the English packages, but in the German edition, it's only available from Silver onwards. So it might be that this feature is not available in your particular version.
I see.
Yeah. But,
my heart. Okay.
But it's a very useful feature if you want to read in, as Marty also pointed out, read the Church Dogmatics in German and compare different translations and so on. Yes. So you can close that, of course, and then move to other places. And one thing I should mention also is you can translate, of course, whole sections, sentences or whole sections, but you can also just select a word. And then instead of just translating it, it will provide a definition, a dictionary definition of that word, which is very helpful. Speaking of dictionaries, we also have this. I don't know if that was the one you referred to, Marty, but we have this Modern Theological German Dictionary in Logos, which I just put here, and I can pull it down there so we can still see the church dogmatics. And there you can also just search for words, say Schöpfer, and then you will get the definition in that dictionary. That is probably a helpful resource for someone who's not that proficient in German, but who still wants to access the church dogmatics in the original. By the way, if you want to add or ask questions while I'm speaking, please feel free to do so. And also,
it's also worth noting the highlighting capacity. Sometimes I like to highlight one or the other. It just allows your eye to see the two different ones, and it's just a matter of focus and finding it again when you come back and all that too, which I found very helpful.
Sure. First, one thing you will notice comparing the German to the English is that there's some underlining in the English that is not there in the German, and these are what we call visual filters. You can apply to basically any text, also to Bibles or any text like in Logos. These filters, for instance, also contain popular highlights. So some of the sections you find underlined here are just sections that others who read the church dogmatics found helpful and therefore highlighted in their own versions. Sometimes that's helpful, but for now, you can just make sure that we're not disturbed by those when we make our own highlights. So you can just basically highlight whatever you like, selecting, and then just choose a color you would like. You can also specify your own styles. For now, we'll stick to that. And in that way, you can mark up your own version of the church dogmatics. And that works in English, but of course also in German, in different colors and styles.
It is worth noting too, you can, in the English text, you can ask for the German. So sometimes you're sitting there in the English and you say, what is the German word for that? And immediately get a German word. And so anyway, that it does work going the other way too, which sometimes is another, sometimes that's what you want. I just want to know the German word for that English word. So
yeah. That works with the translation feature very well. Yeah. Something that the English edition has that we've not yet brought to the German one are these tags. You will see here, for instance, doctrine of creation is underlined, and that means that there is a specific link to our fact book, which is our encyclopedia we are creating for Logos, and there you can type in any kind of theological concept or word, and then immediately get more information about that. And since I filled my library with all kinds of Barth resources, most of the resources that will be suggested now are Barth resources. So I can now pull up other resources by Barth or on Barth dealing with the doctrine of creation. You can see them here. And that works with other texts as well. Like here, you can find more about the concept of idealism, and depending on what you have in your Logos library, it will pull up definitions from dictionaries and other resources that help you come to grips with those concepts and terms. Yes, so something that Logos is famous for is, of course, also the search functionality. So I'll try and show you how that works. You can do inline searches right here in the resource, like just pulling up this and then search for a German term like Schöpfung, like that. and then it will search for you. On the right hand side, you can see there are 18 instances in this volume of the Church Dogmatics, and these are highlighted. So you see here Schöpfer in the section we highlighted, and some way below. And then you can, of course, just click through using these arrows, selecting search results, using these arrows, click through all these instances where the term appears. So these are more basic search functionalities you can use to find certain terms. And in this case, this will be restricted to this volume we have opened right now. So this specific KD 3.2 sections, paragraphs 43 and 44. But you can also do a more comprehensive search by using this Logos search functionality. And then there are different search types, as you see there. For the Church Dogmatics, you would go to the book search, because it's obviously not a Bible and none of the others. So you can then select, I have already done that, the Church Dogmatics, the set from this menu. And then you can run a search on the whole Church Dogmatics. Let's take one example. The person, as I mentioned, I studied someone in the early modern era dealing with natural theology, and this person is actually mentioned in the Church Dogmatics. His name is Salomon von Til. And when I type in his name, hit enter, then I can see the search results. It's now in Kirchliche Dogmatik, volume 4, and then these paragraphs. And when I click on this little arrow, I can see the context where this name appears. And if I want to see the whole thing, I just click on it, and then I'll see the whole thing in context, where this person appears. So yeah, you can run fairly sophisticated searches. Maybe I just go back to that. You can search for specific orders. You can search for certain expressions appearing next to each other or in a certain range of words. And there are specific search templates mentioned here. I've not tried that on the Church Dogmatics yet, but of course, if you select all of the words, then you can do that and select different God Schöpfer, for instance, and Welt, worlds, and then it will pull up words where these appear in close vicinity. You can then select in which range of words and so on. So these kinds of more sophisticated searches are also possible with the Church Dogmatics if you want to do that. And sometimes that's very helpful to go a little bit deeper into the text on a more word level. One thing you will also realize, this is now, let's go to the parallel view again, is there are references to other sources. Of course, there's the Bible, and these references are clickable, as they say. You can just click on them, and here you have the Bible text within one click. It opens in the preferred Bible translation. But this works also with, for instance, do we have a church father here somewhere? Let's see. I can, of course, search for that for, let's say.
It's going to be in the small print.
Yeah, it's going to be, yeah, exactly. There's not much small print in here in this volume.
Oh, there was something there, I think.
Yeah.
Well, there's certainly something in the reality of God, die Wirklichkeit Gottes, in the first couple of paragraphs. I thought there was something.
Yeah. Also, for instance, the Calvin's Institutes, whatever you have in your library, that can usually be is also clickable. That's a pity. Some of the things are not yet.
Oh, here you go. So die Erkenntnis Gottes, so fünftes Kapitel, paragraph 27, die Verborgenheit Gottes, the paragraph just before there, you've got references to Augustine, which would be a good example.
Paragraph 27?
Yes.
In which volume?
This would be in the seventh volume. So 2.1, paragraph 27. So this is in die Grenzen der Erkenntnis Gottes, and the very final paragraph of that section. Oh, and it'll be able to translate from the Latin, I presume.
Yes, you can also translate from the Latin. Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating. But that we do need to say this is for silver, Logos silver.
Well, you have to go to our website and see. There's an overview of the different packages, and then you will see which feature is included in which package, because there are differences between the German and the English feature sets. And for German, I know that it's there from silver onwards.
In the English, of course, the Greek and much Latin simply has an asterisk that you click and it translates it. But sometimes there's French and other things that you can use the translation feature now and that. So sometimes I was stopped before by those that were not translated in English, but now you can use the translating feature for everything.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Anything else, Marty, you found helpful? I mean, I'm not using this on a daily basis, obviously, but
well, I mean, all I'd say is you are jumping into a new world, and so it is worth just taking the time and beginning at the beginning and just getting a collection where you have all color Barths that will show up when you hit library and say Barth, that all the works that you want are there. To recognize that there are specials occasionally for getting other works. There are collections of Barth's works that can be ordered. So having an adequate collection, so that, as you said, having Calvin's Institute, for example, if you have it, then they'll collect. So just having the right collection, and then just beginning by reading and using some of these translation features. There are a number of things across the top in where you've been selecting that it's just worth going down and saying, when I click on a word, all the other times this word shows up also become highlighted, and things like that, that they're just little features. But when you see this word shows up once versus 100 times in this paragraph, you go, wow, this is something important, versus this is the only place. And so there's a lot of just exploring that one needs to have some endurance to get to those more complicated places. But even just to be able to, the reading group I was just in before this, we're reading through 3.1. So I have 3.1 up, and I can be reading in it, and I'm still on the Zoom talk, and I can have made notes. You can make notes, highlight, making notes for things, so you can click on those and the notes come up. So if you do interact with other people on Zoom, it makes the Dogmatics easy to find and move around in right there. So again, these are just some of the things that I'm doing it with, that I found it not only for the specific text that would just be like having the hard copy in front of me, but all the other ways that allows you to interact with the world. Sometimes I'll be on a Zoom and I can copy what I'm doing there and put it over in the chat immediately for people to have access to, which again is a very nice feature to be able to do. So these are just the kind of things that develop as you go along, depending upon whether you're doing private study or whether you're studying with others in English or others who have German knowledge, and you can make those things available as well. So many layers to be entered into. Someday, we're going to do Logos tutorials on all these things for just Karl Barth's Church Dogmatics. And so somebody would be able to have many of these steps that you're saying here quickly to really have a slower walkthrough to get at those things. That's something I've been proposing to them. They've not yet taken my bait on that. But anyway, my hope is for the future is that we just keep recognizing that there's so much resource here, but Karl Barth's Dogmatics themselves have unique features that aren't just the same as the other ways of doing things. So it is worth recognizing that this is a unique piece of literature with a unique network of literatures that it connects to. So start where it's immediately valuable and then just add on a bit at a time. And I guess the question, where do people call when they have questions about how to, they get stuck? How do they get help with those little things? I know he clicked this button and up came these 2 books and then he did something else. How would they get answers to those simple kinds of questions to be able to not feel alone in the journey?
Well,
yeah. I would add as well, Marty, as well with reading the Church Dogmatics, for those who are really thinking about it, obtaining a little bit of proficiency in German. I wouldn't normally send students, be they PhD students or undergraduates, to the Church Dogmatics to improve their German. Well, until now, because there are parts where the German is straightforward, the sentences are shorter, and it's devotionally rich. It slows you down, and I find myself when I read some of those opening paragraphs, Gott ist der ist in der Tat seiner Offenbarung. God is who he is in the act of his revelation. This brings me joy, and I want to worship. But there'll be lots of other sentences hot off the heels of that short sentence and others around it that are difficult, frankly, even for Germans to wrestle with. But this gives you the tools to navigate the difficult parts while enjoying the easier, more simple sentences. It slows you down then, gives you confidence to navigate this delicious text and to worship the Lord as you do so.
And again, everything you copy and paste is footnoted, which if you do much work on writing on Barth, the ability to copy and paste and have it footnoted immediately is of great value.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. You're right. You can just copy and paste into a Word document or whatever word processor you would like.
Yep.
And then I can actually, since we have it already still open, you can make notes. That's for sure. Also, here I have already notes. And if you just select this text, and I want to, that's a very long sentence. And I click on copy and I copy it into a note here. You can see it adds the footnote or the reference, and that also works in Word, and it will add a proper footnote in Word as opposed to this addition here in the Logos note. But that's certainly very helpful when you copy and pasting a lot. Yeah.
And I believe you can even set which reference style the footnote will take, can't you, within Logos?
Yeah, absolutely. You can, if you use the settings over here, open the settings, and then there's Turabian and whatever style that is more common, Chicago Manual, yeah, MLA, whatever, yeah, and then the reference will be formatted accordingly.
Thank you, Matthias. Incredibly helpful, just to give us a taster of the things that can be done. I really wanted to hand over to Marty for a final word. I don't know if it's possible to unshare your screen. Oh, there you all are again. A goal, really, I hope, is is to get people reading Church Dogmatics, Kirchliche Dogmatik. As I said at the start, changing Church Dogmatics certainly changed my life. And that's a cliche, but it certainly did. I ended up calling my son Carl for this very personal reason. But Marty, maybe could you give us a final flourish, a rhetorical flourish to finish this video together, that would encourage those who are watching to give the Church Dogmatics a go as a way to point them to Jesus Christ?
Yes. I think most people think of theology as a set of topics within a framework of thoughts, and they study each one and come away with definitions and descriptions. I've come to recognize that the Church Dogmatics it's a fluid, dynamic engagement with God. It really is a study that engages one in the God who is made personally present and invites us into a life together. And so it's not just that you're studying probably the greatest text of the last century, maybe the last 5 centuries back to Thomas Aquinas. It is a text that really invites us into theology as really coming to know the personal God who wants to be known and makes himself known in the person of Christ. So it is not merely academic. It is truly that avenue of opening up an engagement, of conversation, of knowing and being known, where we discover both who God is as well as who we are. And so the Dogmatics is not just a text. It really is a unique invitation to understand God, not just theology as a discipline, but to really call theology to do the work it's supposed to do. And so when I say to people, what does the word theology mean? Most will say it's talk about God. And I said, what if we let God talk? What if God shows up speaking? And that is the underlying presumption that Barth has, is that God talks and we listen and then we respond, and then we're invited more deeply in knowing the one who wants to be known. So the Church Dogmatics are way beyond just a huge set of books that are difficult to read. They are a path that is not taken alone. Karl Barth is a guide in a sense, but he also makes sure that the voice of Jesus Christ is the voice that is truly heard, and through him to know the Father and the Spirit who gives us the ears to hear. That's what I think the Church Dogmatics provide. And maybe we need a bit of German sometimes to help hear that, to hear it in its original language. The English is obviously worth engaging, but to recognize it is an ever-deepening adventure into life with the living God. And that is the hope that I think Barth had, that you wouldn't worship him, but the one who is revealed in and through this work.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much for joining me, chaps. Very grateful for your time. And this brings us really to the end of this little video, and I do hope that some of you are encouraged to pick up Church Dogmatics or even Die Kirchliche Dogmatik as a result.